Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. There's something that I think a lot of people don't understand about people and their value. A person's value is based on their character, and a person's character is not based on how productive that person is. It's quite hypocritical of people to act as if people who are born retarded, such as people with Down syndrome, have value, don't deserve to be killed. But then those same people judge everyone else by the standard of the smartest and most charming people in society. It's ridiculous. Either the measuring stick by which we measure human value is based on character, on morality, or it's not. If it's not, then we should kill all the people with Down syndrome and all other people with such disabilities, because it doesn't matter that it's not their fault that they're retarded, because the standard of value is not a moral one. They're retarded, and it doesn't matter that they're not bad people. They're unproductive to society, and therefore they should be eliminated, because if the standard for human value is not morality, then the standard for human value has to be objective standards, like IQ, memory, health, beauty, maybe money, etc. But most people would be opposed to judging retarded people for being born retarded. They'd act like that's totally immoral, right? But they don't apply the same standard to normal people, even though they should. You know, they think that, oh, well, these retarded people, they have inherent value as human beings. But they don't act like normal people have inherent value for being human beings, right? Normal people are all born with different strengths and weaknesses, and the overall measurement of a person's worth or abilities or whatever is the same is not necessarily the same as another person's. Right? So, you know, some people have different qualities which are strong or weak or whatever, but it's not as if everybody's qualities, when you add them all together, come to the same sum. That's not true at all. Some people have, you know, all the good qualities. They're very beautiful, and they have a high IQ, and they have a great memory, and they're very creative, and they have very good health, and they have a lot of charisma. You know, and other people, they have none of those qualities, right? They have bad health and no charisma, and they have a terrible memory and a low IQ, and they're not creative and they're ugly, right? So some people have everything, and some people have nothing, right? And other people have maybe one or two or maybe three of these qualities, like they might have a high memory, a high IQ, but a bad memory, like myself, or they might have a great memory and only an average IQ, but they might be ugly with no charisma, or they might have a great memory and an average IQ and be good looking and have charisma. You know, or they might have a good memory and a gorgeous face and a low IQ and no creativity and no charisma, or any other combination of qualities that overall make an average person. Let's say that each person has a potential power rating, like capital P for potential and capital P for power. You know, a potential power rating, that's one kind of rating. And each person also has another kind of rating, and that's an actual power rating, you know, capital A, capital P. Let's say one of these Mr. Perfects, who has all the good qualities, you know, high IQ, charisma, you know, good memory, everything, right? Let's say one of these Mr. Perfects has all the qualities and in great abundance, and he has a potential power rating of 100. And let's say that the average sheeple, who only has an average IQ, average memory, average health, average looks, and average charisma, which is to say he's not boring, but he's not terribly interesting either. Let's say this normie has a potential power rating of 20. The Mr. Perfect could do very little with what he is given. You know, he could abuse his body and not study much and treat people like they're worthless, and he could live hedonistically and recklessly, and yet because his memory is so good, and because his charisma is so strong, and his looks are so good, and his IQ is so high, this enables him to make more money than the normie, who's incredibly responsible and hardworking. And the Mr. Perfect can also end up with more knowledge, more life experience, more influence, more friends, more status, more respect, etc. than the normie. Everything comes easily to the Mr. Perfect. The Mr. Perfect can end up with an actual power rating of 45. Remember, his potential power rating was 100 because of all of his gifts, what he was born with. But his actual power rating is 45. That's what he's done with it, right? So he can end up with a power rating, an actual power rating of 45 with very little effort. And so even though Mr. Perfect has not even accomplished half of his potential, in other words, he has squandered 55% of his potential, or at least, as of yet, the Mr. Perfect has neglected to put in the effort necessary for him to bring to full fruition the rest of his potential. Despite this, the normie is still weaker than the Mr. Perfect guy, even though the normie has an actual power level of 19 out of a possible 20. Because remember, the normies, potential power rating is 20, and his actual power rating is 19. So the normie has reached 95% of his potential through his, hard work and his moral character and his responsibility and everything else, right? Taking calculated risks, sacrificing his youth and energy to accomplish something, etc. So, the normie does everything right, and he reaches 95% of his potential. So what happens? It's just like in Legends of the Fall, that movie with Brad Pitt? When the older brother tells Brad Pitt's character Tristan that he, the older brother, followed all the rules, God's rules, man's rules, and Tristan followed no one's rules. Tristan broke all the rules, and yet everyone still loved Tristan more than they loved the older brother. Everyone only looks, in real life, this is how it is. Everyone only looks at the actual power rating, not at what the person has done relative to what they were given in terms of genetic gifts. Few people blame a person with a power of 45 for not even realizing half of their potential, even though they should. Everyone instead praises the person, the Mr. Perfect, and marvels at the person, at the Mr. Perfect or Mrs. Perfect, and wants to be near that person because of their charisma and their money and their intelligence and their sense of humor and all the rest of it, right? And yet the normie guys who made the absolute best of their life, as was possible for them to accomplish, such guys get little or no respect from society at large. No respect from women, no respect from leaders, no respect from other men, not even respect from their own family. A person who has a 90 IQ and makes $60,000 a year should be given way more respect than a person with a 130 IQ who makes $60,000 a year, assuming that they're both equally moral, equal in opportunity, equal in looks, equal in charisma, equal in everything else, right? But unfortunately, assuming the IQ difference is the only difference between these two people, one who makes more money, one who makes the same amount of money but has a lower IQ should be given more respect because he accomplished more with less. Or rather, he accomplished the same amount, but with less, right? So he did something that was much harder to accomplish. He pulled, so he reached more of his potential than the other guy did. So he should be given more respect, even though he only has a 90 IQ. But unfortunately, people don't judge people this way. They should, but they don't. They just look at, for example, how much money people make, not how difficult it is for those people to make what they're making. In this way, the viewpoint of most people is totally fucked up. And some people even judge the psychotic elites this way. Some people think that the elites are less despicable than the common people just because the elites are better looking, more charismatic, more brave, more clever, etc. But the common people have been given almost nothing, and the elites have been given everything. The common people at least work an honest job with what they've been given, and yet the elites don't do anything honest with what they've been given, despite the ease with which they could use their power to accomplish good things. The elites, if they wanted to be good, they could turn their power to accomplishing huge good things, but they don't. The poor are generous, but the rich are stingy. For example, if a rich person gives $100,000 to a charity, he is praised for his generosity, right? But if he is worth $10 billion, that $100,000 that he gave is merely 1/100,000th of that billionaire's wealth. It's almost nothing to him. But another person who only has a savings of $1,000 and they give $1 to a beggar on the street, that poor person has given 1/1000th of his savings. So his act of generosity was literally 100 times greater than the act of generosity by the billionaire, only giving 1/100,000th of his wealth to charity by giving $100,000. You see, people judge things all wrong. People should judge other people not by what they accomplish, but by the difficulty with which they accomplish what they accomplish. Everything is relative, and this must be taken into consideration. After all, we do not want to start exterminating the weak and the retarded, do we? Or do we? If we do, then let me suggest that if we are going to embrace such savagery as killing all retarded people, then I would remind people that such savagery would be far more effective if directed against the elites, not against the people in society with the worst genes. In other words, if we're judging people on what they accomplish and not on their efforts and character, then the logical conclusion is that we should exterminate the weak. But if we're going to exterminate people, then we should exterminate the tyrannical elites, because they too are not very productive with what they've been given, right? We should kill them even if only because of wanting to benefit ourselves by killing the predatory elites so that we can end the wealth hogging that they do, right? So from multiple viewpoints, if we're going to embrace that savage view of things, then let's kill the elites. And if we're not going to embrace that savage view of things, then let's stop praising the elites and let's start valuing common people more, because they're doing more with what they've been given than the elites are. Either way, we should either stop blaming or devaluing the common man, or if we're going to take the other view, then we should kill the elites. Either way, we're doing something wrong today, right? If we're going to hold on to the idea that we judge people on their efforts and their intentions and on their morality, then let's stop judging people on how much they give and how much money they make and how talented they are. And let's instead start judging people on what they accomplish compared to what they have and what they've been given. Right? Like if someone has $100 million, but they inherited it all from their dad, then how is that person praiseworthy? All he did was inherit money. He did nothing, right? Whereas another person who saves up $100,000 through his own hard work and sweat, such a person is way more praiseworthy than the person who just inherited a bunch of money. But of course, women and a lot of men want to act like the rich people are better just because they're rich, even though a lot of them may have, gotten their wealth from, government contracts or unfairly, ripped someone off, some patent or something, or they did some other, either illegal or unethical or immoral thing to make all their money, or they just inherited it. Either way, they're not worthy of praise. The elites aren't, right? It's ridiculous how we give the elites a pass. It's totally insane. Generosity should be judged by what percentage of one's savings one is giving, not by the dollar amount that one is giving. Just like Jesus said, when that one lady put that penny into the donation box, he said, this woman has given more than any of the other people who are giving today. All these rich people coming by the donation box and putting big amounts of money and stuff. And Jesus said, right after that woman put that penny in, he said, she's given more than them because she has hardly anything. And she gave. And they have a ton. And they just gave, a small percentage of what they have, right? Like, it didn't hurt them to give. But she gave even though it hurt to give, right? So her generosity was way more valuable. It was more genuine and more substantial. So this principle, this understanding, this principle that I'm talking about in this video has been well understood for thousands of years because it's in the New Testament. So what I'm saying here is not radical at all. What I'm saying is just common fucking sense, but people don't even get it these days because hardly anyone is religious anymore. And even if they are, they don't really think about these things, right? It's ridiculous. Earning ability should be judged by how moral one was while climbing the ladder of success, whether one acted morally or whether one backstabbed and stole and lied and cheated in order to climb the ladder of success, right? If someone climbed the ladder of success and made $1 million, but did so morally, such a person is way more praiseworthy than another guy who made $1 million but did it in a totally dishonest and unfair way and evil way, right? I mean, this is obvious. But yet people don't act like this. They don't view things this way, even though it's common sense. And earning ability should be judged, like I said earlier, compared to IQ, right? Like, the 90 IQ guy who I talked about earlier, who made $60,000 a year, and the 130 IQ guy who made $60,000 a year. The 90 IQ guy should be given more credit. And I'm not necessarily saying you should demonize or say anything bad about the 130 IQ guy who makes $60,000 a year. I'm just saying, like, if you're going to praise them, you got to praise the 90 IQ guy more for making $60,000 a year because he did more with less. And if we're going to judge people in this more rational way, then we need to stop giving the elites a pass for their sexual degeneracy, their infidelity, their greed, their callous indifference, their dishonesty, etc. Either their intentions are proper or they're not. If they're not, if their intentions are bad, then they're evil and need to be exterminated, especially since their money gives them great power to manifest their evil thoughts into the real world by enslaving people with NSA surveillance, trade agreements like the TPP, etc. Because they have power, their evil intentions are all the more dangerous. That is, the evil intentions of the elites. Because the elites have power, their evil intentions are very dangerous. We need to realize that this makes them a top priority. This makes the elites public enemy number one. It means that we need to kill the elites as quickly as we can before they kill us, which they are planning to do, as the Georgia Guidestones imply. We are currently holding the elites to a lower standard than we are holding common people and poverty-stricken people, which is ridiculous because the elites were given everything, good looks, high IQ, a bunch of money from their parents, etc. They were given everything, money and the genetic, Powerball. They got everything, and yet we're holding them to a lower standard than we're holding common people and poor people. It's ridiculous. You know, people hate homeless people, but they don't hate the Rothschilds. People hate single mothers, but they don't hate directors of intelligence agencies. People hate and despise guys who beat their wives, even though one man beating one woman causes little damage to the world, but people don't hate politicians much, despite the fact that the politicians create policies that cause tons of people to be beaten by their significant others due to frustration over the poverty caused by the kleptocratic actions of politicians. In other words, it's crazy that people hate a guy who beats his wife when they don't hate the politicians 100 times more, even though the politicians are passing laws that cause tons of men to beat their wives. And therefore the politicians are basically beating the wives of thousands of men, right? Like, it's ridiculous. It's totally insane. Politicians are responsible for the beating of tons of women, and yet men and women will blame one man who beats his wife way more than they'll blame politicians. It's ridiculous. It's insane. People need to start hating the people who are truly to blame, not the people who are right in front of us. Just because you cannot easily beat the shit out of a politician does not mean that you should not want to. Does not mean that you should not recommend to other people that they get some balls and help you overthrow the government and kill nearly all the politicians for having committed treason. And yes, nearly all of them have committed treason by voting for wars which would be called war crimes if any other countries did it, and for turning a blind eye to unconstitutional NSA surveillance, as well as many other forms of treason. Fiat currency, which is clearly unconstitutional, you know, the prison industrial complex, you know, allowing CIA to traffic drugs and all the horrific things that have gone along with that, allowing, you know, them to cover up pedophilia committed by politicians and other people, etc., which has happened in not only America, but England and other places. I mean, the politicians have all committed treason. We need to execute basically all of them. I mean, you know, one or two of them are okay. Like that one woman who tried to pass that law that would outlaw the CIA from helping rebels in other countries, right? Because I think she knows that the CIA is trafficking cocaine and using it to fund the proxy wars and stuff like this, right? Like, so she wants those laws, those wars to become illegal, that the CIA won't be able to wage proxy wars, which it you know, does drug trafficking for to get the money to do those wars, right? So, you know, politicians like that woman, you know, are really rare. So I would let politicians like that live, right? And Ron Paul, if he were still a politician, I'd let him live. But I swear, like, 1% or less of politicians deserve to live. All the rest of them deserve to die for treason. And treason is punishable by the death penalty. So we can absolutely convene common law courts, you know, give them notice, and if they don't show up, we convict them in absentia, and then we execute them. We start waging a war on the country. So this is how it is, you know? But we don't even need to do that, because we know that is exactly what would happen. We know that they would not respect our common law court. We know that they would, you know, declare us a terrorist organization or whatever and try to shut us down. All we need to do is just start waging war. I mean, the treason is so blatant. There's no reason to convene a common law court, but we could do it if we wanted to. But either way, we need to start trying to execute these politicians, and we need to start waging war against the government. It is that fucking simple. We need to overthrow the government and kill almost all the politicians, and the banksters, and the Wall Street assholes, and the Hollywood types like Harvey Weinstein, all these scumbags. They all need to die. These people have been pedophiles and drug traffickers and liars and thieves for literally like a century or more. It's disgusting. And our apathy and cowardice in letting them get away with it is just as disgusting. Women will call the cops and will not give their husband a pass for smacking them or accidentally twisting their arm or whatever, but a woman will not advocate for overthrow of the government, but will instead give politicians a total pass for voting for a war that killed 1 million people. 1 million innocent people! And men are not much better. Men have this same ridiculous attitude of blaming the little guy, blaming the little problems, etc., instead of going after the root of the problem, which is government and the politicians and the military and the intelligence agencies and the multinational corporations and the banksters. You want to know about how virtuous government is? Read the book Whiteout, The CIA, Drugs, and the Press. That's what it's called. Whiteout, The CIA, Drugs, and the Press. And it's called Whiteout because it's about the cocaine trafficking of CIA. It's a really good book. You've got to read it. It's by the uncle of actress Olivia Wilde. You probably know who she is. She's quite famous. She was the one who played the program that they smuggled out in Tron Legacy. Yeah, so she's pretty famous. But she changed her name from Cockburn, pronounced Coburn, but it's spelled Cockburn, right? Like Cockburn, and that's her uncle's name. So she changed her name to Wilde so that she could have a successful career, right? Although ironically, I think she probably would have become a star even sooner if she had a name like that. Like a really really good looking girl with like this sexually salacious name, and that's her real name, right? She probably would have gotten famous even quicker if she'd used her real name, but she probably thought that would harm her career, so she changed her last name to Wilde or used that as a stage name or whatever. But her uncle's name is Alexander Coburn, so that's the guy who wrote Whiteout, the CIA Drugs in the Press. And so that's how you can find the book, type in the title or type in his name, right? The book is an excellent summary of much of the information that various sources have exposed regarding the CIA's cocaine smuggling, which is not a conspiracy theory, but is an open secret, a fact, for anyone willing to do even the tiniest bit of looking into it in order to find out the facts. You could read the huge and painfully detailed book Dark Alliance by Gary Webb, or you could read the somewhat more entertaining but less comprehensive book The Big White Lie by Michael Levine, both of which I have recommended in the past. But I think that instead you should read Alexander Coburn's book Whiteout. It's an incredible book that would be best for someone who wanted to read just one book on the topic. One book that would cover most of the basic facts regarding CIA and its cocaine smuggling. I bookmarked a bunch of pages while continuing to read the book recently, and I'm going to make a video similar to the video that I made reading parts from Israel Shahak's book, Jewish History, Jewish Religion, The Weight of 3,000 Years, in that I'm going to make a new video where I read all those pages from Whiteout. You may learn a lot, or you might just get your appetite whet for reading the book yourself. But regardless, I do hope you read it. It's an amazing book. Whiteout should be mandatory reading for every American high schooler. I mean, how are you supposed to intelligently vote? How are you supposed to know whether government is a good thing? How are you supposed to know whether big government is acceptable or not if you don't know the horrific things the government is doing? And how are you going to know the horrific things the government is doing if you don't read books like Whiteout? I guess that book is yet another example of the principle that I was talking about earlier. Here you have Olivia Wilde, who is just an actress, probably a liberal and deluded like the rest of them are, and she's wicked famous, even though she's only beautiful and charming and has been in a few good movies. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know about her being super smart or anything. And then you have her uncle, who wrote an incredible and very important book, and yet hardly anyone knows about him. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, these people who are not so great are getting all this credit, right? And then this other person who is awesome, and he's hardly anyone knows about him, right? It's a fucking travesty. People only judge others on their outward qualities, not on their inward qualities, or even on their true contribution to society. And why is this the case? Because people have little morality these days. At least that's how it is in America, due to, the slow death of religion and the corruption of the people by propaganda for decades and decades, right? Little morality and little courage. If we had both morality and courage, we would rise up and kill the top 0.1% of men, and we would then remake the world and give freedom and honest money back to the people, as well as the terrifying self-responsibility that would force them to rediscover the importance of morality, thus bringing back morality as well. First must come courage, then courage leads to violence against evil or subversion of evil, and this grants freedom. And then freedom gives birth to morality, because under freedom, you have to be responsible for yourself, and to have a safety net, you have to be good to other people. So when there's freedom, there's morality. And morality makes for a sane, stable, functional, sustainable, peaceful, prosperous, productive, rapidly advancing society where everyone is immeasurably happier than they are today. Immeasurably happier. Even if only because of not being screwed up by promiscuity, drug use, and other negative things that people of the 1950s never indulged in. And now a bit of Illuminati propaganda. In this newest season of The Magicians, Julia wears a necklace that is just a chain and then the letter V. Although it's a bit short and wide to be a typical V, but still, I think it's supposed to be a V. And you've probably already noticed that sometimes the letter U is written like a V. I think it was the Romans who used to do that, but I can't remember for sure. And if you've seen all my old videos, then you might remember me mentioning in a video about how Anastasia Steele in the movie 50 Shades of Grey wears a necklace all throughout that movie that is just a chain and then the letter U. I think Julia's V necklace is just another way of making a U necklace. And if you further remember from that previous video of mine that I put out many months ago, I said that the letter U can mean inner energy. I looked it up and I was surprised to find that. And so I think that that's the meaning of both Anastasia Steele's U necklace and for Julia's V necklace. After all, 50 Shades of Grey was quite a feminist movie, And The Magicians is a very feminist show. Not nearly as bad as The Fosters, but bad enough to warrant mentioning. The Magicians is based on a trilogy of books by a guy, but the co-showrunner and co-creator of the show, the TV show, is The Magicians, is Sarah Gamble, and so her feminist viewpoint is very clear in the show. So it wouldn't make sense that she would have one of her main female characters wearing a necklace whose secret meaning is inner power. After all, isn't that what feminism is supposedly all about? Unleashing the power of women by removing the oppressive, sexist, abusive, patriarchal restraints on women? Isn't that what feminism is supposedly about? So it would make perfect sense if that's why they put her, that's why they had her wear that particular necklace, right? I just thought I'd mention this in case you find it interesting, especially considering that it also indicates the occult or symbolic nature of the way the Illuminati communicates with us, although it seems to me that this kind of thing is something that they either do for fun or is something that they put out there for those who are interested in looking into the Illuminati in order to sort of initiate the public that is smart enough to find out that there's intentional symbolism in shows and music videos and stuff. So I want to say that. This has been Redshift. I hope you got some out of this video. Peace, trucks.